You are sitting safely on a sofa, holding a bowl of snacks, when a car on the television suddenly barrels straight at the camera, and for one glorious fraction of a second, your highly educated adult body does something deeply dignified. It ducks. Your shoulders jump, your eyes blink, and the bowl tilts just enough to launch one brave piece of popcorn onto the carpet. Almost immediately, you feel ridiculous because the car is made of pixels, the screen is flat, and you knew that before the scene started. You knew it while the car approached, and you definitely knew it the moment your nervous system tried to hide behind your own neck. Here's what happened. A two-dimensional image triggered a three-dimensional escape response in a brain that fully understands televisions, movies, editing, computer graphics, and the fact that Jason Statham is not personally driving through your living room. The obvious answer is that your brain briefly mistakes the image for reality, but that gets the most interesting part backward. You do not flinch because your brain fully believes the car is real. You flinch because parts of your visual system detect the geometry of a possible collision before the rest of the system finishes deciding what that collision means. The response is not a failed belief, it is an early precaution, and the reason that precaution survives connects human babies, distracted adults, frightened mice, people who cannot consciously see part of their visual field, and one extremely suspicious internal security guard who still has not received the memo about Netflix. Picture vision before walls, books, windows, photographs, or screens existed. You're an animal moving through a world where nearly everything visible is physically present, so a dark shape overhead might be a branch, a bird, or a rock. The universe had not yet invented the comforting category of special effects. Most visual motion is not an emergency, but one pattern carries a special meaning, an object growing rapidly larger while its edges expand outward from a point. Scientists call that visual looming. Looming usually means one of two things. Either an object is approaching you or you're approaching it. And if the expansion stays centered, the object may be on a collision course. In ordinary ancestral life, this information worked the same way smoke works. It didn't guarantee disaster, but waiting around for absolute certainty was an exciting way to remove yourself from the gene pool, and the safest response was never to convene a committee. Object expanding, impact possible, move face. This system doesn't need to identify the object perfectly. A falling stone, an attacking animal, and your cousin Grunk running downhill with no steering all share the urgent geometry of approach, something taking up more of your visual field quickly with a future location that lands approximately where you keep your skull. Natural selection never built one general-purpose brain that calmly solves every problem from first principles. It produced layers of interacting systems, some flexible and skilled at detailed interpretation, others fast, specialized, and biased toward preparing an action. The fast systems aren't stupid, they're just answering a different question. Your conscious mind asks what this is. Your defensive machinery asks how soon until it hits the meat. Here's the immediate objection. If this reaction is so automatic, why don't you duck every time something gets larger on a screen? You can watch a giant company logo fly toward the camera without diving under the coffee table, and some people flinch dramatically while others barely move. Knowledge and context matter enormously. Attention, expectation, screen size, speed, contrast, trajectory, sound, and individual experience all tune the response, and higher brain systems constantly influence faster defensive ones. Suppressing the duck doesn't erase the original collision signal, it just means several systems are negotiating. Recent evidence suggests that negotiation reaches deeper into the brain than the familiar primitive brain versus rational brain story implies. One key structure is the superior colliculus, a small layered region in the midbrain that helps coordinate rapid orienting movements of the eyes and head and contributes to processing visual motion, important events, and possible threats. Calling it the lizard brain would be catchy, wrong, and unfair to lizards, but it is part of an evolutionarily old system that existed long before humans invented film criticism. Visual information travels through multiple routes. Some processing supports detailed recognition, that's a red sports car, the actors inside it, and the franchise probably should have ended 3 movies ago. Other processing estimates motion, direction, expansion, and possible time to contact. That separation matters because seeing isn't one single event. It's a cascade of overlapping jobs. Your brain extracts edges, contrast, location, direction, speed, expansion, identity, meaning, emotional importance, and possible action, and those results don't all arrive at one tiny office simultaneously. Information suggesting incoming can shape attention and movement before you form the calm verbal conclusion. Fictional incoming object displayed on consumer electronics. But the faster system isn't completely blind to meaning. In a 2026 study, Monica Tu, Philip Kragel, and their colleagues at Emory University used brain imaging and computational models while people watched naturalistic videos and more controlled looming displays. The superior colliculus didn't respond only to the motion of approach. Its activity also carried separately measurable information about the category of the object, meaning the ancient gatekeeper may notice more than something is expanding. The surrounding brain still plays a role. Connections involving visual cortex, attention networks, the pulvinar, and the amygdala appear to shape the response. And in the study, superior colliculus activity also tracked reported fear, arousal, and whether the experience felt positive or negative. The honest picture isn't a blind primitive alarm on the ground floor while an intelligent brain works upstairs. It's a densely connected security team with one employee who reaches for the alarm button a little too quickly. Researchers have been finding versions of this response for decades. In a classic 1971 experiment, Harvard researchers William Ball and Edward Tronick showed expanding visual patterns to 24 infants between 2 and 11 weeks old. Symmetrically expanding shadows that specified an approaching object produced coordinated avoidance reactions and distress, while patterns specifying a miss or a receding object did not produce the same reaction. The infants didn't need to understand what the approaching thing was, and they didn't need a detailed theory of screens, because the crucial information lived in the changing pattern of light itself. This doesn't prove every part of the response is complete and permanently hardwired at birth. And infant behavior is messy, with looming sensitivity changing across age, contrast, speed, and other stimulus properties. Even so, collision-relevant expansion carries meaning extraordinarily early, long before anyone explains perspective with a whiteboard. Adults complicate the picture mostly because adults are professional suppressors of embarrassing behavior. Put an adult in a lab, tell them you're watching, and their nervous system immediately hires a public relations department. So in 1992, Sheila King and her colleagues gave adults a computer tracking task to occupy their attention while looming stimuli appeared. When a display specified an object rapidly approaching on a collision path, most participants produced defensive head avoidance movements, and comparable non-collision motion didn't produce the same result. When participants weren't distracted, the visible movement became easier to suppress, and the reflex showed up most clearly when the conscious supervisor was busy elsewhere. It's a bit like discovering an office has an unauthorized raccoon by scheduling a meeting with management and watching what happens in the break room. Later work showed that a collision path can get special priority even when the viewer never consciously recognizes it. In a 2009 University of Washington study, Jeffrey Lynn, Scott Murray, and Jeffrey Boynton presented looming objects that either appeared to collide with the observer or narrowly miss, and the collision path captured attention more effectively. When questioned afterward, participants reported being unaware the trajectories even differed, and in separate tests they still struggled to consciously distinguish collision paths from near misses. The visual system had extracted behaviorally useful information the viewers couldn't clearly report. A 2024 study pushed that idea further. Fanhua Guo, Peng Zhang, and colleagues used high-resolution 7 Tesla brain imaging to examine how people processed approaching objects aimed either at the head or just beside it. Pathways involving the superior colliculus, a thalamic region called the ventromedial pulvinar, and the ventral tegmental area showed collision-sensitive responses even when attention was directed elsewhere. The researchers also studied people with damage to the brain's primary visual pathway, and collision-related activity still appeared when stimuli landed inside portions of the visual field those patients couldn't consciously see in the ordinary way. Stronger superior colliculus responses tracked with better detection performance, even without normal visual awareness. None of this means a secret second person lives inside you, watching everything while you see nothing. The brain isn't a haunted duplex. It means conscious visual experience is only one possible product of visual processing. Information can shift attention, pupil responses, orientation, and defensive preparation without ever becoming a clear sentence in your mind, which is why saying, "but I knew it wasn't real," doesn't solve the mystery. Knowing is real. The duck is also real, and both come from overlapping processes that don't always finish their work on the same schedule. Humans aren't special here either. We belong to an enormous biological club whose main entrance requirement is simply not wanting to get flattened. In a well-known mouse experiment, researchers placed a display above an arena and showed the animals a dark disk expanding rapidly overhead. Many mice ran toward shelter. Others froze, and closely related displays, including a receding disk, proved far less effective at triggering either response. The threat began as nothing more than light from a flat monitor, and the mouse never needed a philosophical position on representation. It just detected a pattern resembling something approaching from above, which in mouse history has generally not meant a surprise birthday cake. Researchers have since identified different retinal and midbrain pathways that guide freezing and escape, and context matters even here. Escape becomes useful when shelter is available, while freezing tends to win the nervous system's deeply unpleasant strategy meeting when it isn't. The shared logic extends far beyond mammals. Locusts prepare collision avoidance MIRBs, birds carry neurons sensitive to impending contact, and fish and insects respond to rapidly expanding shapes. The circuits aren't identical. Evolution behaves more like generations of mechanics solving the same brake problem with different parts, but the recurring logic stays simple. Expansion predicts approach. Approach predicts contact, and possible contact deserves priority. In 2024, another Emory University team tested how deep that shared logic might run. They built a compact artificial neural network inspired by the looming detection system of fruit flies, and remarkably, the model helped predict defensive blinking in human infants, superior colliculus responses in adults, and part of the arousal people reported while viewing naturalistic videos. Your brain isn't secretly a fruit fly with a mortgage, but the computational problem is old enough and important enough that a relatively simple approach detection strategy reveals patterns shared across very different nervous systems. Here's the core reversal. You duck at the screen not because your brain fails to know the image is fake, but because the system's preparing you for possible impact. Never wait for every interpretation to finish voting. The response isn't a hallucination, it's a precaution. Consider what would happen if the order were reversed. If some ancestor refused to move until every visual department submitted a complete report. Large object detected. Please specify species. Unable. Motion blur. Is the object hostile? Unknown. Could it be symbolic? Impact. That ancestor becomes an educational diagram for somebody else's cave. A defensive system tolerates false alarms because the costs are lopsided. Ducking when nothing hits you costs a fraction of a second and maybe some social dignity, while failing to duck when something is real can cost teeth, vision, consciousness, or reproductive access to the next season. In signal detection terms, the threshold has to permit some false positives, and a smoke alarm that waits to identify the exact chemical composition of the smoke is technically sophisticated and practically on fire. Your collision machinery follows the same logic. It was never designed to produce perfect beliefs about movies, only to improve your odds when certainty is unavailable. So why doesn't the visible screen border shut the system down completely? Sometimes it nearly does. Expectation and visible barriers tune defensive reactions, and in a 2012 experiment led by Cosimo Sambo and Giandomenico Iannetti, researchers studied a defensive blink response that strengthens when a stimulated hand moves near the face. Placing a thin wooden screen between the hand and face suppressed that enhancement, meaning the nervous system took the barrier into account. Your television frame offers contextual information in a broader sense. Even though it's not a literal shield from what happens in the movie, you see the unmoving room, the screen edges, the wrong scale, and the fact that the approaching car stops at the glass, and those cues help prevent a full escape. Suppression isn't necessarily instant, total, or identical across people, though. Rapid central expansion can still grab attention and start preparing movement before context arrives, like a tired museum guard saying, "Relax, it's art." The result might be a blink, a shoulder contraction, a tiny backward head movement, or a brief spike in muscle tension. And often the movement is so small you notice it only after it begins, or not at all. This is also why filmmakers and game designers can strengthen the effect without ever convincing you that fiction has become reality. Make the screen larger, darken the room, add rapid acceleration, aim the object straight at the camera, begin in the visual periphery, add an approaching sound, use first-person perspective, and in virtual reality, connect the image to head movement and fill nearly the entire visual field. Each choice moves the stimulus away from small moving picture over there and toward event happening in the space around me. Sound works especially well because the space immediately surrounding the body gets represented through multiple senses at once. Your brain doesn't maintain separate, polite little realities for vision and hearing. It combines them to estimate what's nearby and what action might be required. An approaching sound can create urgency even when you can't see its source. And pairing it with visual expansion gives the nervous system two witnesses telling the same alarming story. A silent clip of a ball approaching may register as noticeable, but add a sharp whoosh and an impact sound, and your eyelids may sign a temporary peace treaty with each other. The effect is personal too. Anxiety, expectation, experience, and learned fear all shift the defensive safety margin. Athletes get better at reading trajectories, boxers learn protective postures, and drivers may treat a vehicle's edges almost like an extension of their own body. Because your brain's working map of me is surprisingly negotiable. Use a tool repeatedly and the nervous system incorporates it into action planning. So holding a racket, driving a car, or moving through virtual space can shift what counts as behaviorally important near space. The defensive system is ancient, but it updates around goals, abilities, available shelter, expectations, and whatever body plus equipment creature you happen to be. That creates an important wrinkle. It would be wrong to say the ancient brain always reacts first and the modern brain always reacts second, as if evolution built two clean floors connected by a staircase. The real architecture is densely connected. Cortical and subcortical regions influence one another. Expectations alter very fast responses. Attention amplifies or suppresses what gets processed, and as the 2026 Emory study suggests, the superior colliculus can carry information about object category alongside motion. Not every flinch proves fear either. Looming can raise attention, preparation, or arousal without producing terror, and a friendly dog, a baseball, and a giant cartoon cupcake can all share approach information while differing enormously in meaning. The reaction changes through learning too. See a cinematic trick 50 times and prediction reduces the surprise. Wait deliberately for the object and you might stay still while the person next to you jumps hard enough to qualify as a weather event. There's no single flinch gene, no tiny caveman in your skull pulling an emergency rope, and no reason to treat every screen reaction as a pristine fossil from the Pleistocene. The honest claim is narrower and more interesting than that. Human vision contains fast, deeply conserved, context-sensitive mechanisms that respond to optical approach and possible collision, and flat displays reproduce enough of that information to alter attention, arousal, blinking, pupil responses, and defensive movement even when conscious knowledge insists there's no physical threat. Here's the modern irony. For nearly all of animal history, a rapidly expanding object was physically approaching, and light carried information from the object to the eye because the object existed in the nearby world. Then humans invented machines capable of delivering the information without delivering the object, and we separated the signal from the danger. Your nervous system receives the visual grammar of impact while your living room stays completely unchanged. The retina reports expansion, motion systems report approach, defensive circuits prepare the face, object processing systems assess what's coming, and higher context reports television, all while your body begins responding to an event with no physical location behind the glass. That's the evolutionary mismatch. A collision detection system shaped for a world where convincing optical approach usually came from moving matter now operates in a world where strangers manufacture optical collisions, add bass, edit them at 30 cuts per minute, and beam them into your bed while you eat cereal at midnight. The system isn't broken. The mismatch is that modern media presses its buttons without providing the ancient event those buttons normally predict. Picture your nervous system as a prehistoric gatekeeper. For millions of years, whenever it saw the sacred expanding circle, something was probably about to enter camp at speed. Then, on one ordinary Tuesday, humans handed it a smartphone, and now it watches cars, bullets, fists, monsters, footballs, spaceships, roller coasters, and aggressively animated company logos rush toward the face. It pulls the alarm, the conscious brain says it's a trailer, and the gatekeeper lowers the spear while remaining deeply suspicious of the entire entertainment industry. That suspicion is sensible, honestly. The system still protects you in the real world, redirecting attention when a cyclist enters your path, when a cabinet door swings towards your head, when a bird crosses the windshield, or when someone throws you an object before checking whether you're ready. You don't want to uninstall it just because a few filmmakers cracked the password. The tiny embarrassment of ducking at a screen is the fee you pay for a nervous system willing to act under uncertainty. You're not gullible, you're not secretly unable to tell fiction from reality, and your rational brain didn't lose to your primitive brain. For a fraction of a second, different parts of the same connected nervous system handled different jobs. Some detected approach and prepared for the worst. Others evaluated the object, checked the context, and canceled most of the order. That sequence is a feature, not a flaw. Fast protection first, precise explanation second. Next time a movie sends a truck, dinosaur, fist, or improbably aerodynamic chainsaw straight at the camera and you feel your head pull back, notice how elegant the mistake really is. A flat pattern of light borrowed the geometry of danger, your body offered a tiny insurance payment, and somewhere beneath your polished adult understanding, an ancient gatekeeper once again saved you from being struck by absolutely nothing. Tell me in the comments what makes you flinch harder, something flying at the camera, a sudden loud sound, or a jump scare face. If you want to keep understanding why your brain and body do things that make no sense in the modern world, subscribe. We've got a lot more of this coming.